Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me? If you can hear me, type a yes in the chat box. Good, good. That's fine, that's fine. Yeah, good morning once more, everybody. Today we're looking at Business Policy 2, Bus 420, and I am one of the facilitators taking this course. You have seen my name there. I am Dr. Gloria Alaneme. So first, I would like to take us through coming. Yeah, first of all, I would like to welcome us to this course. It is an amazing course and more or less an integration of what you have been doing from year one till you got to this stage. The reason I said so, you must have done similar courses, and most of the things we're going to be doing in BOS 420 may not be new to you because you must have done them either in your year one, your year two, your year three, year four, year five. You did production, you did marketing, you did corporate planning, you did business environment. All those were prerequisites to your doing BOS 420 because BOS 420 will integrate everything you have to do. But first of all, let's look at the course overview. What and what are you expected to do in this course? What are you expected to do in this course? One will look at the definition of policy. We look at its importance, its functions, features, the processes of policy formulation. We'll also look at budgeting and control, business performance appraisal, management by objectives, financial and economic indices, as well as the strategy formulation and implementation processes. We'll also look back at business environment, what has happened, interrelationships within the environment. We'll look at planning, talking about strategic planning and corporate planning once more. We'll look at the role of employees and managerial behavior in strategy formulation. And then we'll also look at the organic functions of business, which you have done before, showing your business environment, management information system, entrepreneurship, and most importantly, analyzing business cases, among others. You have this module uploaded, so you can go there and check all of these things and see for yourself. But for today, we're going to take the study session 1. Yes, and for us to move on, we need to look at the learning objectives. What are we expected to have learned at the end of today? I believe that at the end of today's lecture, you, an individual, should have been able to systematically describe how business policy evolved. You should be able to define business policy. You should be able to enumerate and discuss the importance of business policy, describe the functions of policy, itemize and explain the features of policy, and also outline the policy formulation process. Now let's look at evolution of business policy. Business policy, we were told, well, evolved in 4 phases. And those 4 phases, Hofer et al. In 1984 described them as paradigm shifts. Of course, we know what paradigm is and a shift. Paradigm could be a practice, a culture, maybe a way of doing things, and then you shift from one to the other. So they are looking at business policy evolving in those 4 phases. And that's the reason they call them paradigm shifts. Whereas CASM in 1999 now told us that these shifts are overlapping. They are four quite all right, but they are overlapping in nature, which means you're not likely to know when one phase ends and when another begins. You won't know when one phase ends and when another begins. And what does that leave us with? It leaves us with the fact that as one is ending, the other is starting, or even as one is still operating, another is infused into it. And these four overlapping phases, they named the ad hoc policy making phase, the planned policy making phase, the strategy paradigm making phase, and the strategic management paradigm phase. Now let's look at the ad hoc policy making paradigm. Ad hoc, like the name suggests, is something you just put together probably in a short term. Like you have committees, say in your church, in your place of work, everywhere. You can just put up, maybe an ad hoc committee that will just do a certain thing. And because of the nature of what is happening around at that time, you decide to have an ad hoc committee. And so that phase or the paradigm started in the 1930s in the USA. And why was it so? It started because the American business was expanding. Their products, their customers, their markets, and all of that were expanding. And so business operators felt there was the need, to have this ad hoc policy because of all those, expansions and what have you. And then we had the situation where we had informal leadership or informal functional policies. Yes, there was this division, quite all right, but whatever the operation was at that time was informal in nature. And so they needed to harmonize those things, given the expansion in their markets. And so they started with the ad hoc policy making, which was short, in nature, maybe for a month, 2 months, 3 months. And of course, that did not, take care of their problems. It did not solve their problems. And so still in that mid-1930s, towards 1940s in the USA still, they decided to see if they can have a long-term plan of their activities, given also the functional areas, that were in operations then, and then looking at the possibility of integrating these functional areas. So they came up with the planned policy formulation paradigm. But then again, they looked at it and saw that yes, we had a long plan, but the way things are going is still not serving our purpose because they really cannot establish how the movement was or is going. And now they moved on to the strategy paradigm, which was in the 1960s. Now the strategy paradigm, we are told, is in the 1960s. And I'm sure you'll be asking what happened between the 1940s and the 1950s before we got to 1960s. Apparently, they were still test running that planned policy. They were still test running it, and the thing wasn't working and what have you. And so they started with the strategy paradigm, even still while they were in, the planned policy paradigm. They were still doing that until in the 60s, they were able to establish that, yes, we can make strategic decisions now. We can take some strategic steps, given the overwhelming competition, the complex nature of the environment, the multifacetedness, the functional areas and their diversity and the growth and what have you. And so they decided to go into strategy paradigm, and that became effective in the 1960s. And so in 1960s, what they had was a strategy paradigm. And I think that spanned till the 1980s. So between the 60s, 70s, they were still dealing with the strategy paradigm until the 1980s. But I'm sure the strategic management came in because the functions of management, managerial functions, became so much and was cumbersome, and they needed to find a way of, merging these two, both the strategic decision and the management functions. Because in all of the, phases that we had, like for instance, the planned policy and the strategic decision, most of these were done by the functional areas. And most times you'll find that top managements are not even in line, or top managements are not giving their full support. And so most times you find that some of those policies will not work because it's like top management was separated from them. But then came the strategic management paradigm where these two broad areas were infused, the strategic processes of business firms and the roles of general management. And that took place in the 80s. And with that, they can move on. And we are still on that, if you ask me, till date. Now, like I told you, there are different viewpoints. We have the viewpoint of perhaps the business operators, which are the ones who saw business policy evolving in 4 phases that they called paradigm shifts, which I have just talked about. And then we have the academic viewpoint of business policy evolution. For the academics, business policy, has started long ago in 1911. Why business operators are talking about 1930s, academics are looking at it from, way back in 1911, when the Harvard Business School introduced the study of business policy. And why was that introduced? They saw it as an opportunity to integrate management courses that business students have done from their first years to the very last year, integrate them together and take them out or up on how to analyze cases, looking at their environment so they can take strategic decisions and help solve their business problems. And that emanated from the Harvard Business School, according to what Christensen et al. Told us in 1982. But of course, they did not just start the course or introduce the course. There was a study by 2 groups of people that actually, supported or, pushed for a study like a course like business policy in the colleges at that time for final year students just like you are, because they felt that introducing that business policy will go a long way in giving the students an experience which will help them even when they leave school. And those studies were carried out by one, we have that of Gordon and Howell in 1959. And that study was supported by, I think it's the Ford Foundation. Is it the Ford Foundation? Yeah, that supported that study. Now, amidst that report that the Gordon and Howell gave, they pressed for the need to study business policy as a course, not just looking at it from any other point of view, but for the fact that as business students who are graduating and who will become chief executives of their organizations in the nearest future, there is need for them to understand the complexity of the business environment and the uncertainties and how to develop tools and techniques that can enable them, operate very well in the business environment when they left there. The other person also is Pearson. Pearson also had a study. And not until 10 years after did the American Assembly of Collegiate Schools of Business, which is a regulatory body guiding or regulating the business schools in the USA, now made it a mandatory course. Business policy became a mandatory course in business schools, okay? And thereafter, after some years, okay, it now became, most of the world adopted it, just like we have it in our school today. We followed suit from what happened in 1969 by the American Assembly of Collegiate Schools. That's the reason you're studying business policy today. So it became an integral part of management curriculum in business schools the world over from then on. So that's the academic viewpoint. For them, it is 1911 and not 1930, like the business people are saying. The only issue is that for the business people, they saw the way they were managing their organizations and felt it was in phases, because one problem will lead to the other, and you would have to follow suit given what is happening within your environment and the environmental needs, and essentially too, because of their competitors. Now, let us look at what the meaning of business policy is. For in-share, there are 1,001 definitions of business policy. If I ask you, I'm sure you have your definition of it, given your understanding, and we have several scholars who have defined it in several ways. But we have that defined by InShare 2013, and it tells us that business policy is the study of the roles and responsibilities of top-level management, the significant issues affecting organizational success, and the decisions affecting organization in long run, among others. So what are we saying in essence? That means business policy is not done by just anybody. It is done by the top management. So what is their role? What is their responsibility? How do they attend to issues that will affect their organizational success? How will they take decisions that may also affect their organization in the long run? Now for Ogbeche, Dixon Ogbeche 2003, in her own words, she feels business policy was designed to integrate the functional area of management. I have said that earlier. You integrate functional areas of management because ordinarily the functional areas, I'm sure you do know them, the area of production, area of marketing, area of finance, area of human resources, and what have you. Most of them were operating on their own, but business policy was designed to integrate all of them to ensure that the organization has one policy which is stated or which is tilted towards achieving their organizational goals and aim. And then CASME 1999 now improved on that by saying, not improved on that because he had his own first, that is laying down a long-term plan. That's telling us that business policy is laying down a long-term plan which the organization follows in order to determine future courses of action. So your business policy will make, you lay down long-term plans to enable you determine future courses of action. Now, what are the objectives of business policy? What are the objectives? For CASME 1999, again, he observed or identified threefold objectives. And they are: one, to integrate the knowledge gained in various functional areas of management. Now, when you say to integrate the knowledge gained in various functional areas of management, like I did said, all functional areas operate on their own. But when you come together as top management to draft or craft your business policy, of course, knowledges that will come from each of the functional areas will be integrated so that at the end of the day, you will have a business policy that will serve the need of everybody. The second objective of business policy, according to him, is to adopt a generalist approach to problem solving. Of course, in every organization, there is a problem and there will always be a problem because the environment is not stable, because the environment is complex, because the environment is uncertain, because it is multifaceted, there will always be problem. So are you now going to be narrow-minded in approaching your problem solving? No, you need to adopt a generalist approach so that your downfall will not come from your marketing, neither will it come from your production. So there has to be that generalist approach to problem solving. And then he said again, to understand the complex interlinkages operating within an organization through the use of systems approach to decision making and relating them to changes taking place in the external environment. Now, the functional areas, yes, are also complex in their own nature. Now, if you must understand the complexity, there has to be that interlinkages, between functional areas in an organization or the departments, operating within an organization. And why is it so? The organization is one whole system. And so if you call it a system, means there are other subsystems which the functional areas are, or the departments or the units are. So there are subsystems of the one system, one whole system, which is the organization. And so through that, they are using the systems approach to make decisions and to relate them to changes that will take place in their external environment. And for me, as well as those even in their internal environment, yes. Now, what is the importance of business policy? What are the benefits you derive from business policy? Business policy is beneficial to organizations in these following ways. It facilitates the movement of managers from one level to a higher level. What do you mean by that? An organization without policy will not have a promotion policy or rule or guidelines. You can't move as a manager probably to, how do I put it, a general manager if there is no policy. So your ability to move from one level to a higher level or to another level is as a result of the policies of the organization that will be followed. The second one is it enables managers comprehend the complex interaction that takes place between the different functional areas. Like I mentioned earlier, we have this complex nature of all the functional areas. And the funny thing is, every functional area, every department or unit feel they are the most important in an organization. The marketing department will tell you, oh, we are the most important. What do they do in that human resource management? What do they do in administration? What do they administer? They just sit in a cozy office, with air condition, doing nothing, while we're the ones who move out to check on the customers to know what they need and how to meet their needs and stuff like that. So they feel, they are the ones who are much more important in the organization. The production unit will tell you, what do they need space for in the administration? Do they really need space? Is it those their files and cabinets that they put there? They don't need it. We need the more spaces because we need to produce and we need enough space, for production. And without us, there is nothing. And the finance will tell you, oh, we are the ones who bring in the money and who think for the organization on how to make money so that the organization will move forward. And so when there is a business policy, it enables managers to comprehend that complexity of every functional area and they will better appreciate that. Now also, it puts business decision making in its proper perspective. It is a case of whoever has the most superior of ideas or the most superior of concept will have the day. So it's no longer, oh, you are the king in your functional area or in your unit. And then whatever you say goes. When we come out and we all take a decision, you make your suggestions, I make mine, we look at them, weigh them, the cons and pros, and what have you, and we settle for one proper one. And so it puts decision making in its proper perspective. It also aids in the understanding of business environment. The business policy that you have will aid you in the understanding of business environment. How do you draft your policy in the first instance? You can't even draft that policy without looking at the business environment. What is happening now? What do you think will happen in the next 1 year, 2 years, 10 years, 20 years? Of course, you have to look at that and then forecast, look at the tools, look at everything before you can now say, oh, this is our business policy. So it is very important that as you're crafting the business policy, you're also exposed to understanding what happens within the business environment. Additionally, it improves job performance. Of course, job performance in the sense that the framework, for everybody to operate, those basic framework, for you to operate, to understand the strategic decision that has been made and the one you're supposed to make and how to apply the case study methodology, will all have to come from the business policy that is crafted. Otherwise, job performance may be something, if anything to go by, lower than expected. So that basic framework will be given through business policy so that you will understand the strategic decisions that you need to make and then apply as the case may be, when there is need for that. Now, it also enables managers avoid interdepartmental conflicts. Interdepartmental conflicts, like I mentioned, will include quarrels at the feeling of superiority and feeling that, oh, some people are not doing anything, while some people are overworked and what have you. But the policy will clearly define who does what so that everybody will feel that everybody is important. And being a system, we all work together to achieve what our objectives or goals are as an organization. It offers considerable scope for personal development. I wonder if there is an organization that does not have any room for personal development of, his or her people. Organizational learning is very, very important. And most of the knowledges that organizations use that you can look at or that you can take as competitive advantage for them is domiciled within the people. So if you do not allow room for people to develop themselves, either through the organization or develop on their own, because you have given a flexible kind of policy that will enable them do the things they do so that they can bring the knowledge acquired to the organization, then that will be disaster for that organization. So business policy offers us considerable scope for personal development. It is stated there. You can take your study leave in some organizations. You can be studying while working and all of that. Some can even send you out for training and all of that. And so basically, it helps managers to become generalists and avoid narrow perspectives that some specialists adopt. You know, some people will tell you, I'm a specialist in this. And so what happens in any other department or in any other unit, they do not know. But with business policy, you have the opportunity of seeing what is happening elsewhere. Now, what are the functions of business policy? What are the functions of business policy? We have said that policy formulation and implementation are very important components of business. And without policies, it is going to be very difficult to get things done in organizations because of the complexity and dynamism of the business environment. And because policies are guides, which are developed by organizations to enable its organization be governed. So they define the limits within which everybody will operate, within which decisions will be made. And so a sound policy should perform the following functions as identified by Aluku et al. In 1998. So what are those functions? That a business policy will provide a guide for thinking and for future planning. It provides us with a guide for thinking and for future planning. This is the policy of the organization that is so and so time we're going to be at so and so place. So what do? We need to put on our thinking caps and think of what to do so that by that said year or by that year that we have agreed that we're going to be at this level, we must be at that level. That is planning for the future. Now, it will also enable us, prevent deviations from planned courses of action. If the organization have planned courses of action that should be taken in a particular time, there's a timeline for every action and what have you. Without having a policy down, many people are going to deviate from those planned actions. There will be excuses and reasons why they will not be able to achieve or why they will not be able to activate what it is they want, the organization is expecting them to activate at a given time. So most times people may deviate where you don't have a policy because the policy will clearly state out even the punishments that need to be meted out for people who deviate from planned courses of action. Business policy also will ensure consistency of action. You will be consistent in whatever you are doing. Whatever is your responsibility, whatever is your role, whatever is your job, you need to maintain consistency of action. In fact, if anything, you will need to improve even on the consistency to even achieve higher objectives or goals or targets that is set for you. Business policy will also promote intelligent cooperation. To promote intelligent cooperation. If you check the importance of business policy when I talked about it, they say the one-eyed man is a king, right, in the land of the blind. So in your domain, in your unit, in your department, you'll be thinking you are the most intelligent. But when you come together from all of these units, and you need to draft your policy and you talk about things that concerns the organization, you will discover there are people who are even more intelligent than you think you are. And so it promotes intelligent cooperation because at the end of the day, the most intelligent ideas will be adopted. Again, it facilitates coordination of action. Coordination of action. How do you coordinate your actions? You can't be doing A while the other person is doing B. The finance can now say, oh, there is no money, when they know that the marketing department will need certain amount of money to do a particular thing that will earn the organization the objectives that they desire. So business policy will facilitate coordination of action. Now it fosters intelligent exercise of initiatives. It fosters intelligent exercise of initiatives. Just like we said earlier, intelligence will come from every angle, from all the units, from all the functional areas. And so what business policy will do for us is foster the intelligent exercise of your initiatives. You bring up one initiative, another person brings up another initiative. All of them are looked over, all of them are played, around with, and then at the end of the day, the rest of the initiatives will be picked. And then it furnishes business policy furnishes us with a basis for judging the quality of executive action. It won't be a case of say one thing and do another. Because there is a policy, you can go back to it and say, this is what transpired and this is what we have in our business policy. So why the deviation? Why this? Why that? You can actually judge the quality of executive action. And executives sometimes, can be overbearing and overwhelming, and they get up and they take one decision, and everybody will like, what happened? Why is it? Why did we not follow our policy? Did the policy not state that it is this, it is that? And so those are some of the functions of business policy. Now let's look at the features of policies. What are the features of policies? We are saying policies must possess the following features for effectiveness. One, it has to be appropriateness. You as a production company, a manufacturing company, cannot go and adopt policies that are meant to guide the banking organizations or the banks. So whatever policy you're going to develop for your organization must be appropriate, looking at the goals of the organization, looking at the mission, visions of the organization, and looking at everything that has to do with the organization. So it has to be appropriate in nature. Now, excuse me. Dr. Mane? I'm on, I'm taking my class. Okay. Okay. Sorry for that disruption. Now, policies also must be clear. Why should they be clear? Why should they be clear? There shouldn't be any ambiguity in your policies. People should be able to interpret the policies just the way it is. You don't include maybe strange connotations or include jargons or anything that would make people begin to give it a wrong interpretation. No, your policies must be clearly stated so that everybody will understand it just the same way you want it. Now, it must be flexible. Flexibility is very important. When you have your policies, it should be easy for adaptation, and people can use it in repetitive situations. What are we saying? When you make a policy, you should allow room. If, for instance, you are telling us that the maximum for a manager or the maximum expense for a manager is 500 naira, for instance, and then there is the need for that manager, maybe something urgent cropped up and you need to add, say, a 20 naira to that 500 naira. You could have that kind of flexibility to say, okay, but not more than, yes, your maximum is this, but in the case of this, not more than this, so that anybody operating will be able to understand. Because when you tie it all down and it becomes maybe, how do I put it, bureaucratic, that you have to do this, you have to do that, you're likely going to lose out on that business. If there is a business that you need to maybe acquire or a business you need to do at that point, to enable you, move forward. Now, inclusiveness and comprehensiveness. Business policy should have that feature of inclusiveness and comprehensiveness. Policies have to be comprehensive so that it will be wide in scope. You don't make statements that people will not understand and interpret very well that will limit them. It must be comprehensive enough such that you will understand every bit of it. You don't leave anything to chances at all. Now, it has to be definite and specific. Policies have to be specific. What do you want to talk or say, or what should be your policy on employment? What is your policy on training? You must be specific. What is your policy on production? What's your policy on marketing, on sales? What's your policy on people's salaries? So it has to be very specific and very definite. Additionally, policy must be simple. When we talk about simple, we've talked about ambiguity the other time. You must write in simple manner that will make for ease of understanding and implementation. Because sometimes when it's complex, people may not be able to understand how to implement it. They may not be able to understand how to implement it. But once it is simple, you are likely to know what to do, even as an operating officer. On ambiguity, we have said it, it must not be ambiguous so that people will not misunderstand you while they are implementing. It must be uniform to ensure effective implementation. You don't come in a unit and you say, oh, this subunit, will do this, whereas for the whole unit, you have said this is what will happen and what have you. Even if you have to do that, it must be in tandem with what you have as the policy guiding that functional area. So there should be that uniformity in the policies you are going to make. There shouldn't be differences, because once there's a difference, somebody may want to cash in on that and say, oh, because of this gap here, because of this loophole here, and then they do some other things. Policies should be stable. Stable in the sense that you don't change them continuously. We are not saying if you make a policy now that in the next 10 years you can remain with that policy. Well, if there is need for that, if the policy is doing well and enabling you to achieve what you have to achieve as an organization, you can leave that on. So that is stability of policies, so that in the next 5 years, the policy of the organization has not changed. But when you change it continuously, it becomes a problem. If we take, for instance, the policies of the federal government of Nigeria, let's even take, for instance, during the military era, when you wake up this morning, it's one government in power, and then before you know it, probably there's a coup, another comes in, and all the policies are changing. You could see that will not help business operate. They can't operate in such a situation. So also, it has to do with policies in the organization. When you change them too constantly or continuously, it brings confusion. So they should be stable to an extent and shouldn't change continuously. We have other features that Dixon Obeche and Aluko et al. Also identified as part of the features. One, they are saying policies should not be oral. I am talking now. If there is nothing to give you, if we don't record this study now, or this lecture, or this interaction, you may not find it anywhere. And then you'll be wondering, and there's a limit to which you can store what I have said. But if it is recorded and then you can play it over and over again, you'll be able to say, oh, this is what she said and that is what she said. And so they are calling for documentation of policy. It must be documented. Once you have drawn up the policies, put it in black and white so that any day, anytime, anybody can pick it up and say, this is the policy of this organization. Then it should be fair. Fair in the sense that what is good for the geese is also good for the gander. Don't go and do it in such a way that some people will be feeling, unsecured because, or insecure rather, because of that policy. Oh, the policy is favoring so and so unit or department, or the policy is favoring so and so persons, in terms of promotion and what have you. Let it be fair so that everybody will feel that, yes, there is equity and then can work, towards achieving the organizational objectives. then it should be consistent. Don't say one thing today and say another one tomorrow. Well, steady. You have to. If there has to be a change, then everybody should be carried along. That, okay, this is how we're going to be doing it. Say every 5 years, we change our policy, every 2 years. So even from the beginning, from the time you enter an organization, you already know that this is what will happen. Probably, yes, this is the policy operating now. Probably in the next 2 years, we'll have another one. So it should be steady and not conflicting. So what are the processes of policy formulation? How do we formulate policies? But before we go into that, who formulates the policies? Who are those? We are told that it's the top management that will formulate policies, and they will ensure the documentation of that policy and the organizational circulation. That there has to be a wide circulation. So they are the ones who will formulate the policy, ensure it is documented, and then circulate it to everybody. So the top management formulates the policies. The middle level management, what they do is to interpret the policies to ensure uniformity of understanding for implementation purposes. Why is that so? It is so because they want everybody to be on the same page, doing the right thing at the right time. So the middle level management is saddled with that responsibility of interpreting these policies that has been formulated by top management so that everybody will understand it and be able to implement for the purposes of achieving organizational objectives. While the lower level management ensures that policy are implemented. They are the foot soldiers. Yes, top management has formulated, middle level management has interpreted it for them. Now the lower level management will ensure that these policies are implemented by putting their actions into play and establishing appropriate strategies within their functional areas so that they will be able to implement all the relevant policies that there are. It is good, while the top management is formulating the policy, to also carry along these operating personnel. There is need for them to be involved, even though they may not be there when the last, or the last work or the last job is done in it. There will be need for them, to be involved in policy. You can call for, what do you call them? Is it memorandum or what have you? Let them make inputs that will enable or guide the top level management in formulation of their policies. Because if you do it outside of them, they may not even know. And when you bring such policies, implementation becomes a problem. So there is need to get them involved, in the formulation process, not minding whether they are going to be present there when the top management is doing it or not, but they can make contributions from their different units. So basically, for us to formulate an effective policy, we need to, one, identify a problem area or situation. What is the problem? In what area are we encountering that problem? If you don't identify a problem, then there will not be any need for you to have a policy. Identify the problem area and the situation. Maybe look at decisions that have been taken in similar case and see if there's a repetition anywhere in any of the organic business functional areas. I can see you raising your hands. Please put your hands down and keep your question. When I am done, you will raise your hand and I'll ask you to, I'll enable you ask your question. Now, so like I was saying, we need to identify a problem first. What is that problem? What is the situation that needs a policy on? Is this something that has been happening over and over again? And then we need to put a policy so that we'll encourage that or we'll discourage it. And so is that problem, maybe have we taken a decision that is similar, in that sort of problem before and what have you? So first, identify a problem or area that needs a policy on. Now, you need to document them. Whatever it is you have found out from those problem areas, you now put them, into policy statements in a policy manual. You circulate the policy statement to all managers who will operate under the policy, and then periodically you review the policy statement, given changes in the business environment. And so that brings me to the end of our class for today. I will just give us time to ask questions, but before then, let us go through what we did earlier. I told you that we've just taken the study session 1. It is more like an introductory session. And what did we do? We defined business policy. We also described how policy evolved, from 2 different perspectives, the perspective of the business operators and the perspective of the academics. And then we discussed the features of policy. We looked at the definition. We looked at the functions of policy. We also discussed the importance and the benefits of policy. And then we finally examined the process of policy formulation. All these things are going to be taken, most of them are also going to be taken in their own, maybe in-depth way in subsequent study sessions. They may come in there. Yes, so be ready to also see them once more. But these are the things we did this morning. And so I expect that all of us would have taken that in. When I am done, I'll also put this, I'll hoist it on our LMS so that those that want to have the slide can have it. But meanwhile, I want to call it a day with my presentation. So now I will enable you to make your contributions. I'll enable you to ask questions, make your contributions, and what have you. I am coming. Show the speaker video. I'm coming. I think I'm basically in part. Okay, so let me see the hands up. I have Anne Chinyere. Anne Chinyere. Okay. I've asked you to unmute. Can you unmute yourself, Anne Chinyere, and ask your question? Is Anne Chinyere in the house? If Anne Chinyere is in the house, unmute yourself. Can you unmute yourself? Agbaje Solomon. Agbaje Solomon.
Hello, ma'am.
Yes, I can hear you.
Good afternoon, ma'am. I would really appreciate this lecture you get to us this afternoon. My question is, in a situation whereby a company has a policy and due to the changing of government and the policy is not suitable, can they change it maybe after a year or something like that, ma'am?
Of course, of course. That's exactly what we talked about when I talked about the features of policy. We said it could be steady, but that does not mean you can't change it, okay? Now, business is operating within an environment. Business does not operate in a vacuum. You cannot say, I am closing my eyes to what happened or what happens in the environment, and then you're operating on your own. Of course, you are just heading towards, breaking down. If we take, for instance, what happened, was it in 2005 with the bank recapitalization thing? The banks, of course, had their policies, I am sure, within their organizations. But when a superior, guide or regulation came on board, whatever policy they had at that time would be jettisoned to accommodate what has come from the environment of government. So in that case, every member of the organization will understand why that is so. You're not changing it because you're robbing Peter to pay Paul or because you want to satisfy a particular unit, to the detriment of the other. But this is coming from the environment, and incidentally, an environment that you do not have control over. So they can change their policy in that order. But the fact remains that you must carry your staff, your employees along when you are doing such things. They need to understand, because changes are really very difficult to adapt to. So you must let them know why you are doing that. Even though we know they operate within that same environment and they may know, but some people may want to prove, heady. And so you need to let the staff know that because of this, we are intending to change our policies. And then it's important to take contributions from them, so that will also, make whatever policy you're going to, formulate become robust enough, because they will also bring in their own ideas. Yeah. Does that answer your question, Agbaje?
Very perfectly, ma'am. Thank you very much, ma'am.
You're welcome. I can see Adewale Maxwell Akinsheye. Please, can you unmute yourself, Adewale? Adewale? Is Adewale in the house? Adewale Maxwell Akinsheye, I saw your hand up. Can you unmute and ask your question? Adewale is not in the house. Salahuddin, raise your hand the normal way. You raise your hand from the participants. What you are doing, oh yeah, unmute. I'll just allow you to unmute, but that's not the way it should go. You should raise your hand from the participants list. So yes, Salahuddin.
Thank you, ma'am. My question is this, ma'am. What kind of policy can you recommend to our Minister for Finance? Because you can see that our economy is in shambles, and we don't have a clear direction of which policy this government is operating. What kind of, being an academic and as a doctor, what kind of policy will you recommend to this present government?
Well, if you're talking about finance, and finance is meant for those who are in finance and those who are in economics, they are the economic team who should look at what is happening within the environment to know the kind of policies they will set in place. I cannot sit here and tell you this is the policy that will be adopted, because they have much more information that will enable them take or craft some policies. It is not what you and I know. We read a lot from the social media, we hear from the TV what they want us to hear and what have you. But if you ask me, the kind of policy that they should take now is to go out, take a vox pop of what the people feels and how they feel and what is happening within the economy, to know the kind of policies to put in place. For instance, the CBN came up some few weeks ago and they were talking about cryptocurrency and what have you. They are banning it and doing all sorts of things. Have they asked themselves, why are people going into cryptocurrency? People are looking for ways of survival. People are looking for ways of keeping their money safe, so that anytime you want it, the money will not devalue. Because if you leave it in the banks, in Nigerian banks, you come up today is exchanging for 400 naira, tomorrow is 450, another day is 470, and what have you. Is that what you want for your money? Or you put it and then the other day they will tell you $1 is now 500 naira. That is not what we want. So they have more information. They should feel the pulse of the people. Like I told you in business, before you formulate any policy, you need to take inputs from all the functional areas. And in governance too, that is what you need to do. I can't tell you this is the best of policies that they should take. I'm not a